Welcome to Fragile Bonds, to the powerful stories of family, love, loss, and the choices that shape our lives. Now let's begin today's story.
In a quiet residential neighborhood outside Boston, Rachel lived with her husband Michael and 10-year-old son Jacob. Rachel's belly was swollen large as she reached full term. As a freelance graphic designer working from home, these past few months had been hectic days of juggling work with preparing for the birth. Jacob had lost his biological mother to illness 5 years ago. The boy who had lost his mother at just 5 years old gradually opened his heart after meeting Rachel 3 years ago, and now he fondly calls her Mom. When he came home from school, he would rush straight to Rachel's room and excitedly tell her about his day, a joy that was irreplaceable to Rachel. Michael was also a kind and devoted husband who, despite his busy days as a real estate agent, never hesitated to make time for his family. Eagerly awaiting the baby's arrival, he would spend weekends earnestly reading parenting books and assembling the crib. One weekend evening, the three of them were in the car heading to Michael's parents' house. Saturday dinner at Michael's parents' home had become a weekly tradition. In the back seat, Jacob was explaining a new math problem he'd learned to Rachel. When Michael said while driving, "Mom made your favorite roast beef," Jacob nodded happily. Michael's parents lived in an upscale residential area near Boston. His mother-in-law Caroline was a striking woman with a straight-backed posture and neatly groomed salt and pepper hair, a former teacher. His father-in-law Robert had a gentle, ever-present smile, but he never contradicted his wife's opinions. Caroline, greeting them at the door, first lightly patted Jacob's head. "How was this week's test? Last time you got a B in math," she asked. When Jacob answered, "I got an A this time," Caroline nodded with satisfaction. "Well done. But aim for an A+. You should be capable of that." As dinner began around the dining table, Caroline turned her gaze to Rachel. "Rachel, are you keeping up with Jacob's piano lessons? A child's education is crucial at this age. When I was a teacher, I devoted myself to drawing out the maximum potential of children this age." Rachel answered with a smile. "Yes, he goes once a week. Jacob seems to be enjoying it." "Enjoyment alone isn't enough," Caroline said quietly. "You need to give him goals. You should have him compete in next year's competition." Rachel answered with some hesitation, "He's only been at it for 6 months, and I want to respect his wishes." Caroline's expression hardened slightly. "Your approach to raising him is a bit too lenient. Children need appropriate competitive spirit and goals." Michael intervened. "Mom is saying this because she cares about us, Rachel. Mom is an education professional." Rachel said nothing and served Jacob seconds. Jacob looked up at his mother with concern. After dinner, when Rachel began talking about preparations for the baby's room, Caroline leaned forward with interest. "Have you decided on the baby's room?" "Yes, I'm thinking of pale green wallpaper with a forest theme, decorated with stuffed animals," Rachel explained. Caroline shook her head. "That won't do. A baby's room should be white or beige as a rule. Too much visual stimulation affects the baby's sleep. And furniture placement is important too. The crib should be away from the window, and the air purifier should be in this position." She issued instruction after instruction, rejecting all of Rachel's plans. When Rachel started to say, "But we've already," Jacob interrupted. "Mom's idea is fine. I like the room Mom planned." Caroline cast a cold look at Jacob. "You don't interrupt. This is adult conversation." Jacob fell silent, and Rachel gently hugged his shoulder. Michael said nothing, nodding along with his mother's talk. Rachel felt anew the difference in values with her mother-in-law, but with the birth imminent, she didn't want to make waves. In the car on the way home, Jacob quietly held Rachel's hand. "Mom, I like your way," he said in a small voice. Rachel felt tears welling up as she gently squeezed her son's hand back. One day as the due date approached, Caroline called. "Rachel, I'll accompany you to the hospital when you give birth. You'll be anxious with your first baby, and it's better to have someone experienced. Rachel really wanted to spend time quietly with Jacob and go to the hospital with just Michael. But faced with Caroline's forceful tone, the words to decline wouldn't come. She only answered, "Thank you." After hanging up, Jacob asked worriedly, "Mom, can't I come to the hospital?" Rachel hugged her son. "You'll wait at home with Grandpa. You can see the baby as soon as it's born." Jacob looked a bit sad, but said with a smile, "Good luck, Mom." Rachel waited for the day of birth with anxiety in her heart. At 2 a.m., Rachel woke with labor pains. At first it was a dull ache, but gradually the intervals shortened and the intensity increased. Michael hurriedly called the hospital and also contacted Caroline. Until Robert arrived to pick him up, Jacob held Rachel's hand anxiously. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked in a trembling voice. Rachel forced a smile despite her pain-twisted face. "I'm fine. Soon you'll meet your brother or sister. I'll wait properly. Good luck, Mom." After Robert arrived and took Jacob home, Michael and Caroline took Rachel to the hospital. In the car, Caroline watched over Rachel's condition from the back seat, continuing to issue instructions. "Take deep breaths. Don't panic." When they arrived at the hospital, a long time began. The contractions intensified, and Rachel endured the suffering. Michael held his wife's hand and wiped the sweat from her forehead. Caroline gave detailed instructions to the nurses and actively questioned the doctors. 12 hours later, the baby was finally born. A healthy cry echoed through the delivery room. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, and Michael wept with joy. "Thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much." He kissed his wife's forehead. Though exhausted, Rachel felt indescribable happiness in the warmth of the small life held against her chest. The baby had his little fists clenched, eyes closed, breathing quietly. His hair color was light brown, soft and delicate. After the nurse cleaned and measured the baby, Caroline approached and peered at the baby's face. In that moment, her expression changed. Her broad smile disappeared, and her brow furrowed. "This child's hair color," she murmured quietly. Rachel asked in a tired voice, "Is something wrong?" Caroline immediately composed her expression and put on a forced smile. "No, nothing. You're tired too. Rest well." But her eyes were cold, and she seemed to be pondering something. That night, while Rachel dozed lightly, Caroline repeatedly stared at the baby and searched for something on her smartphone. The screen displayed articles about genetics and hair color. The next afternoon, Jacob visited the hospital with Robert. As soon as he entered the room, his eyes sparkled as he gazed at the baby. "Mom! My brother!" Jacob exclaimed excitedly. "Can I hold him?" Rachel nodded gently, and with the nurse's help, let Jacob hold the baby. Jacob carefully, as if handling something fragile, cradled the baby in his arms. "Hello. I'm your big brother. I've been waiting for you all this time," he whispered. Watching this scene, Caroline suddenly said, "Jacob, don't touch him too much. We don't want him to catch a cold." Rachel answered, "It's fine." He washed his hands, but Caroline snorted disapprovingly. "Still, we must be cautious. Newborns have weak immune systems." Jacob sadly returned the baby to the nurse. Rachel's heart ached watching this. On discharge day, Caroline called Michael out to the hallway. "I need to talk to you," she said with a serious expression. The two talked at length in a place away from the hospital room. Rachel waited anxiously, but when Michael returned, he looked pale and his eyes seemed frightened of something. "What's wrong, Michael? What did you talk about with your mother?" "Nothing," he answered, averting his eyes. "Mom just gave me some advice about childcare." But Michael's behavior afterward was clearly strange. He no longer picked up the baby and nuzzled his cheek as before. and his conversations with Rachel decreased. When Rachel spoke to him, he seemed distracted, lost in thought. Even after returning home, Caroline began visiting frequently. Entering through the front door saying, "I came to check on the baby," her eyes were always directed at the baby, not Rachel. Approaching the crib and staring intently at the baby's face, her expression seemed more like she was trying to confirm something than showing affection. "This child doesn't look like Michael," Caroline said one day, matter-of-factly. Rachel answered with a laugh. "Newborns' faces still change. He might come to resemble his father from now on." But Caroline didn't laugh. She continued staring at the baby with a serious face and murmured coldly, "Is that so?" A few days later, while Rachel was nursing, Caroline suddenly took out her smartphone and began photographing the baby's footprints. "What are you doing?" Rachel asked in surprise. "Keepsake. Baby footprints become growth records," Caroline answered flatly, but there was no warmth in her expression. Rachel felt an inexplicable anxiety. Michael's attitude grew even colder. Previously, he would come home from work and immediately pick up the baby, asking Rachel, "How was today?" But recently he wouldn't even look at the baby. He didn't wake even when the baby cried at night, and on weekends he increasingly went out citing work. When Rachel asked, "Michael, what's wrong? If you have something to say to me," he would only answer, "Nothing. I'm just busy with work." The only one who hadn't changed was Jacob. Coming home from school, he would go straight to the baby's room and say, "I'm home." After finishing homework, he would offer to help Rachel with childcare. "Mom, I'll help change diapers too. I'll prepare the milk. If my brother cries, I'll hold him." Jacob's devoted attitude was Rachel's emotional support. But every time Jacob approached the baby, Caroline would intervene. "Jacob, do your own homework. Taking care of the baby is for adults. Don't be so clingy. You'll tire the baby out." Jacob looked at Rachel with a confused expression. Rachel hugged her son and whispered, "Your kindness is getting through." The postpartum fatigue and loneliness threatened to crush Rachel. Her husband was cold, her mother-in-law visited as if monitoring her, and her only ally was a 10-year-old boy. Late at night, while nursing the baby, Rachel cried. She didn't understand what was happening. Why had Michael changed? Why did Caroline look at the baby with such cold eyes? Then one evening, Caroline called. "Rachel, tomorrow afternoon we're having a family meeting. Please come without fail. Bring the baby too." "A family meeting? About what?" Rachel asked, and Caroline answered in a cold voice. "There's something important to discuss. Tomorrow, you'll understand everything." After the call ended, Rachel felt a sense of foreboding. Jacob looked up at his mother worriedly. "Mom, are you okay?" Rachel stroked her son's head with trembling hands. The next afternoon, Rachel headed to her in-laws' house holding the baby. When she opened the front door, the living room was filled with faces she didn't usually see. Michael's uncle and his wife, cousins, and Caroline's sister and her family. About 10 relatives total sat in heavy silence. Michael sat on the sofa by the window, his face downcast. Only Caroline stood upright, with a stern expression like a prosecutor waiting to testify in court. Robert sat in a corner chair, looking confused at his wife. "Where's Jacob?" Rachel asked. "He's in the upstairs guest room." "This isn't a conversation for children to hear," Caroline answered coldly. Rachel sat on an empty sofa, feeling suffocating anxiety. The baby slept quietly in her arms. Caroline stood up and looked around at the assembled relatives. "Everyone, the reason I've asked you to gather today is because I have a major announcement." Rachel's heart began pounding violently. "What major announcement?" "This doesn't concern you," Caroline directed a sharp gaze at Rachel. "This is our family matter." The relatives stirred. Michael's uncle asked, Caroline, what is this about? Caroline took a white envelope from her jacket's inner pocket. The motion was slow, as if aiming for dramatic effect. This is the result of a DNA test. The room froze instantly. Rachel stood up in disbelief. DNA test? Who? When? I ordered it, Caroline answered ruthlessly. Because I needed to confirm whether this child is really Michael's. As a mother, I have a duty to protect my son. Rachel's mind went blank. You have no right to do that. Without my permission, how did you? Do you remember when I photographed the baby's footprints? At that time, I had someone collect a bit of cells with a cotton swab. I used that and Michael's hair for the test. Agitation spread among the relatives. Michael's cousin muttered, "No way, that can't be." Caroline took documents from the envelope, put on her glasses, and began reading aloud. Official report from the testing agency. Subject A, Michael Harrison, and Subject B, 3-week-old male infant. Test result, no biological parent-child relationship found. The moment the final sentence was read, shock ran through the room. The relatives all raised their voices at once. No way. I can't believe it. Rachel, is this true? Rachel felt her knees about to give out. While holding the baby tightly, she squeezed out her voice. That can't be. I haven't cheated. With anyone other than Michael. But Caroline said coldly, the evidence is clear. Science doesn't lie. You deceived my son. It was planned from the start, wasn't it? To worm your way into a wealthy family. The relatives' gazes turned to Rachel, filled with accusation. Michael's aunt said as if spitting, "You were after my son's assets." One of the cousins muttered, "A con artist." Rachel, crying, shouted to her husband. "Michael! You believe me, don't you? We've been together the whole time. When would I have, with whom?" Michael finally looked up. His eyes were clouded with pain and doubt. In a trembling voice, he asked, "Rachel, is it true? Is he really my child?" Those words tore Rachel's heart apart. "Believe me, Michael. Please, believe me." Caroline pressed on. "Michael, divorce her. This woman was just using you. She was trying to make you raise another man's child." The relatives echoed in chorus. "That's right, divorce her immediately. You don't need to pay a cent in alimony. Rather, we should sue her." Rachel was completely isolated. More than 10 cold gazes were directed at her, and not a single person was on her side. Even her husband looked at her with suspicious eyes. Just then, footsteps were heard from upstairs. Small footsteps coming down the stairs. It was Jacob. In his hand, he held a tablet. "Mom," his voice was trembling. "I should show this, right?" Caroline's expression changed for a moment. "Jacob, I told you to stay in your room." But Jacob held out the tablet with trembling hands. "Grandma, what is this? What are you holding?" Confusion mixed into Caroline's voice for the first time. Jacob said in a tearful voice, "Grandma giving money to the testing man. I recorded it." The room fell completely silent. The relatives gasped. Michael stood up. "Jacob, let me see that." Jacob handed the tablet to Michael. When Michael tapped the screen, the video played. The audio was clear too. The screen showed Caroline talking with an unfamiliar man. The location was Caroline's home study, 2 weeks ago. Caroline's voice echoed. "I want you to falsify the results. I want you to create a report saying this baby isn't Michael's child. The compensation is $10,000. The man's voice answered. "But that's illegal. As a medical technician, It's fine if no one tells." Caroline's voice was cold. It's for my son's happiness. That woman isn't right for my son. I'm doing the right thing." The video ended there. The venue was completely silent. No one could speak. The color drained from Caroline's face, and she stood clutching the chair. Her body trembled in small shivers. The relatives looked at her with astonished expressions. Michael's uncle was speechless. "Caroline, what is this?" Michael, still gripping the tablet, stared at his mother. "Mom, what is this? Explain." Rachel rushed to Jacob and hugged him tightly. Tears wouldn't stop. "Jacob, thank you. Thank you so much." Jacob also said while crying, "I wanted to protect Mom. I saw Grandma being mean to Mom all along. So I thought I'd collect evidence." Caroline began making excuses in a trembling voice. "This was for my son. That woman isn't right for Michael. I was just—" "Shut up!" Michael shouted. For the first time in his life, he raised his voice to his mother. "Mom, what have you done? What do you think Rachel is?" Robert also stood up. "Caroline, you've crossed the line. This is a crime." The relatives also raised voices of condemnation one after another. "We should report this to the police. This is fraud. Caroline, you're insane." Caroline collapsed into a chair and desperately piled on excuses. "This is a misunderstanding. I really was thinking of my son. I thought that woman wasn't right for Michael." "Not right?" Michael's voice trembled with anger. "That's not for you to decide. Rachel is my wife. The life partner I chose. And you tried to tear that apart with lies." He covered his face with both hands. "I believed Mom and doubted Rachel. I doubted my wife, the mother of my baby. Because of you, Mom." Robert said quietly but firmly. "Caroline, I've lived with you for 40 years. I knew that you were sometimes forceful, that you tried to push through your own ideas. But what you've done this time is unforgivable. You've crossed the line." The relatives also raised their voices one after another. Michael's uncle said, "This isn't just a family matter. It's a crime. We must report it to the police." The cousin's wife apologized. "Rachel, we're truly sorry. We doubted you." Caroline looked up and said through tears, "But that woman has a stepchild. A family with a child not related by blood." "Shut up." This time Robert raised his voice. "Jacob is a wonderful boy. Rachel raised him admirably. Blood relation doesn't matter." Hearing those words, Jacob gathered courage and began to speak. Holding Rachel's hand, he spoke in a trembling voice. "You know, I noticed all along that Grandma was being mean to Mom." The relatives quietly focused on Jacob. "I knew Grandma didn't like me either. Because I'm not a real grandchild. That's why she didn't come to my piano recital. She forgot my birthday too. But Mom always smiled and said, 'Grandma is busy.'" Jacob continued, holding back tears. "I remember when I stayed at Grandma's house during summer vacation. When I got up for the bathroom at night, Grandma was on the phone with someone. She said, the plan to drive that woman away. She said, 'There's someone more suitable for Michael.'" Rachel hugged her son tightly. Thinking that such a young child had been carrying such a burden all this time made her heart feel like it would burst. "I was scared. But I wanted to protect Mom. So I thought if Grandma did something bad, I'd preserve evidence. I carried the tablet around so I could record when Grandma came." Michael knelt before Jacob. "Jacob, I'm sorry. Dad didn't notice. I made you go through such painful experiences." Jacob put his arms around his father's neck. "Dad's not bad. Grandma was deceiving Dad." Michael hugged Rachel and Jacob together. "I'm so sorry. Both of you, I'm truly sorry." Michael's uncle, staring at Caroline, demanded in a stern tone. Caroline, who else is involved? Just the testing technician. Caroline remained looking down without answering. But Michael said as if remembering. Mom, Emily came last month. My college girlfriend. You called her too, didn't you? Caroline's silence was the answer. Michael looked aghast. Don't tell me Emily was also in the plan. Emily is a wonderful woman, Caroline finally revealed her true feelings. The daughter of wealthy people, well-bred, suitable for our family. You loved each other so much in college. Yet you chose a divorced woman with a stepchild. I couldn't understand it. The truth became clear. Caroline had wanted to reconcile her son with his ex-girlfriend Emily. Emily was also involved in the plan, intending to drive Rachel out on charges of infidelity and divorce her without paying alimony. The DNA test falsification was the core of that plan. Michael, gazing at his mother, said quietly. Mom, I love Rachel. Emily and I broke up when we graduated from college. That was my decision. And I met Rachel, I met Jacob, and I found my real family. But bloodline, family background, Caroline attempted a final resistance. Family isn't about bloodline. Michael shouted. It's love. Trust. The bond of protecting each other. Jacob is my son. Even without blood ties, our hearts are connected. That's family. Robert called the police. I want to report falsified DNA testing and defamation, he said quietly. Caroline pleaded, Robert, stop, but Robert shook his head. This is the right thing, Caroline. You must pay for your crime. 30 minutes later, the police arrived. Caroline was handcuffed and taken away. The names of the testing technician and Emily were also reported as accomplices. The relatives watched the scene in a daze. Just before Caroline left through the door, she said to Michael. I only wanted your happiness. Michael answered coldly. My happiness is being with Rachel, Jacob, and the baby. Not the happiness you desire, Mom. After the police car left, the relatives apologized to Rachel one after another. Bowing deeply, they said in chorus, We're sorry we couldn't believe, we doubted you. Rachel nodded, looking exhausted. After everyone left, only 4 remained in the living room. Michael, Rachel, Jacob, and the sleeping baby in her arms. Michael knelt on the floor and bowed his head before Rachel. Rachel, I can't ask you to forgive me. I should have believed you. I should have doubted Mom's words. But I believed Mom's words and doubted you. Rachel said while crying, You were brainwashed by your mother too. But Michael, we can't easily go back. You doubted me. You doubted our love, our family. That's a wound that won't disappear. Michael looked up. His eyes overflowed with tears. I know. But I'll spend my life making amends. For you, Jacob, and the baby, I'll become a real husband, a real father. So won't you give me another chance? Rachel was silent for a while. Jacob held his mother's hand. Mom, forgive Dad. Dad was suffering too. Rachel breathed deeply. I need time, Michael. I can't right now. But if you're really trying to change, I'll make the effort too. For our family. Michael nodded repeatedly. Thank you. Thank you so much. Jacob came between them, and the family of 4 embraced. 6 months passed, and Caroline was found guilty of falsified DNA testing and defamation. Though the sentence was suspended, the social cost was great. Isolated from the community, her former friends distanced themselves from her. Not allowed to see her son or grandchildren, she spent days of regret and loneliness. Robert was deeply disappointed in his wife and chose separation. Divorce proceedings were underway. Emily also received a fine as an accomplice. Her fiancé left her too, and she lost all the social status she once had. When the incident was exposed on social media, she was forced to leave her hometown. The testing technician had his medical license revoked and received a fine. He lost his job, and his family dispersed. Michael and Rachel continued couples counseling. Every Thursday evening, they honestly shared their feelings before a specialist. Michael deeply understood that his mother's values were wrong and vowed to cherish Rachel and Jacob above all else. Rachel also gradually regained trust in Michael. The wounds didn't heal easily, but they kept walking forward without giving up. And the baby's first birthday arrived. The living room was decorated with colorful balloons, and a homemade cake sat on the table. The only guests invited were Rachel's parents, Robert, and close friends. Though it was a small party, it overflowed with warm smiles. Jacob was working hard taking care of his brother. When his brother, who had started walking, seemed about to fall, he immediately rushed over to support him. "Are you okay? Your big brother's here for you," he said gently. When it was time to blow out the candles on the cake, Michael began a speech. "This past year, I learned the true meaning of family." His voice was quiet but strong. "It's not blood ties. Not titles. Not wealth or family background. It's believing in each other, protecting each other. That's family." Michael gazed at Jacob. "Jacob, you're my pride. At just 10 years old, you showed great courage to protect your mother. You're a true hero." Jacob looked down shyly. Michael continued. "And Rachel. Thank you for believing in me again after I doubted you. I'll continue proving my love for you every day." Rachel smiled while wiping away tears. After the party ended and the guests left, Rachel sat Jacob on her lap. "Jacob, you're my pride. Even without blood ties, you're my son. And the best big brother for this child." Jacob nodded with a smile while crying. "I'm proud of Mom too. Because Mom is the strongest, kindest mom in the world." "You can choose your family, can't you?" Jacob said quietly. "At school, they taught us blood relation makes family, but that's not right, is it? I chose this family. Mom, Dad, my brother." Rachel hugged her son tightly. "We chose you too. And we want to stay with you forever." Michael joined them and sat down holding the baby. The four sat quietly on the sofa, gazing at the sunset outside the window. The wound still hadn't completely healed. The pain of being doubted remained in Rachel's heart. Michael continued making amends every day. But the four were certainly moving forward. As a real family bound by love and trust. Not blood ties, but bonds they chose together. That was the strongest form of family. Jacob's voice gently echoed through the living room as he read a picture book to his brother. Michael and Rachel held hands, watching the scene. Having overcome a long ordeal, they had finally obtained true peace. There would be difficulties ahead. But this family had the strength to overcome them. The strength to protect each other, and the kindness to forgive each other. In the twilight, the laughter of four people echoed. It was the sound of a real family.